One in Three is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, warriors. Welcome to One in Three. I'm your host, Ingrid. It might sound odd to have a favorite type of episode on a domestic violence podcast, but I do. I love hearing from survivors who not only share their stories, but also help clear a path for others to find freedom and healing. My guest today, Mia Hanks, is one of those survivors. She's also an author who shared her experience with a covert narcissist to help others recognize, heal, and reclaim their power. Here's Mia. Hi, Mia. Thank you so much for joining me on One in Three today.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into our discussion, could you give a little bit of a background on yourself just so listeners can get to know you?
Yeah, so I'm Mia Hanks, and basically my story is that I was married to a covert narcissist for 29 years. That started when I was quite young. I was 19 when I met my now ex-husband, and we got married when I was 21, so very young. And it was just a journey of a lot of years trying to figure out what was wrong and, dealing with a lot of gaslighting, manipulation, and finally, 25 years or so in, putting together those pieces and realizing that I was dealing with narcissism. And so I found my way out and ultimately wrote a book, and here I am today.
Okay, and that book is called Bridemaid?
Yes, Bridemaid, a memoir. Yes.
Okay. And what made you decide you wanted to actually write the book?
Well, when I was at the end of my marriage and learning about narcissism and realizing that this is what was going on, my ex husband is undiagnosed, but most definitely has narcissistic personality disorder. I was trying to find everything I could about this personality disorder and about narcissism and narcissistic abuse. This was a whole new subject for me. I had never really heard of any such a thing. And so I was out there trying to read and find everything I could on the subject. I found a lot of great books, but they were all written by therapists and psychologists for the most part, very academic. And I was really seeking a firsthand account. I really wanted to hear someone else's story of who had lived through something like this, and I just couldn't find it out there. So, after my divorce was final, I decided I would write a memoir and hope that maybe other people out there it would resonate with them.
That's a good point that you bring up, that a lot of the books out there are academic, and they definitely have a place to learn about narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder. But to hear a personal account makes it so much more relatable.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, I'm hoping that my book can be validating for someone else out there who, they think they're going through this, but they think they're alone. They don't think anyone else is living this way. Sadly, a lot of people who are victims of narcissists, they kind of keep it quiet. You worry about people believing you. And so a lot of victims tend to keep it to themselves and feel like no one else out there is going through this. Yeah, I hope this book lands in the right hands, and those people that that need to read my story, that it can resonate with them and give them some validation.
Validation is super key because, like you said, it is difficult to talk about uh, being in these relationships. You carry shame that actually should not be your own shame. And then you also question your reality and who's going to believe you. So I love that you have this book, and your hope is to create validation for those who read it. Let's talk about your book a little bit. Is it? It's it's your memoir. So is it
Yes.
true to your story?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so I basically start at the beginning of my encounter with my ex-husband, and it's told in a series of short stories, all the way through my divorce, and it's chronological, and I I'm trying to show that how the narcissism, how the narcissistic abuse built over the years. It got more intense as each year went on, and you can kind of see through my story. Narcissism does not get better with age; it tends to get worse, and I think that I hopefully showed that very clearly that this is not something that if you think if you stick around long enough or if you can be a better wife that it will get better or go away. It really doesn't. So I take the reader from first meeting my now ex-husband all the way through our divorce and kind of show that whole journey.
Yeah, it definitely escalates. And I think that's part of them losing control. Once you start to identify what's going on and you begin to pull away, they have to escalate their level of abuse to keep you under their control.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, that's a good word, escalation. I mean, that's what I saw in my marriage, year after year. And especially at the end, it got pretty volatile at the end. My situation was never physical. It was all psychological and mental, but I think it was, probably not too far away from turning physical at the end. There was just the escalation that you mentioned. And I think that was some of me figuring this out and putting these pieces together and saying, wait a minute, maybe it's not me, maybe it's you. And that does create more volatility in the relationship.
Now, you said you read a lot of books. Do you use some of that information that you learned in the academic books, and do you put that information into your book?
Yeah, I did. I put a lot of terminology and a lot of like checklists. I put some checklists of, how do you know that you are being emotionally abused, and just red flags to look for. So that was all very much things that I had read and studied on, but also very not so academic. Very relevant. I mean, you can read down these lists and say, yeah, that's me. I can check off every one of these boxes. And, then you, again, it's that validation. You realize, I think there is a problem in it. It's not all in my head.
I think that's a really important piece too of using the academic information you found and making it relatable, because narcissism is a term that is so overused, is a huge buzzword. And a lot of times it's not used appropriately, I think, and especially in social
Yes.
media.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. The people that you hear referred to as narcissists, oftentimes those people are not narcissists. I think the general public wants to call anyone who is pompous, overconfident, and arrogant, we want to call them narcissists. And maybe some of them are, but that is not the definition. There is so it's so much deeper than that. And in fact, my ex-husband being a covert narcissist, if you met him, you would think he was anything but a narcissist. In fact, you would think he was completely the opposite. So that's the danger. What we envision as being narcissistic is really flawed, and the ones who are dangerous are the ones that you would never guess could be a narcissist.
I agree with that. And, people may have narcissistic traits, but that it
Right.
doesn't mean that they actually have narcissistic personality disorder. The overt ones, they're so blatantly narcissistic, to keep your distance and to keep yourself safe and your guard up. But the
Yes.
covert ones, like you mentioned, they're the sneaky ones. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the covert, um, it really puts the victim in a tough spot because the covert narcissist is out there acting in public like they are so humble and they're so kind, they're so empathetic, they're caring, they're generous. They're not any of these things. It's literally a mask that they're wearing. And so it makes it hard for the victim because then everyone on the outside thinks, they thought I was married to this great guy. He's so great, everything is so wonderful. But that's not how he was behind closed doors. So in my case, and probably other victims have lived this as well, I sort of perpetuated this lie for him for a lot of years. I was conditioned very early on to protect him, really, to protect his image. And so I was not giving anyone any indication that there was anything wrong behind closed doors. In fact, to the contrary, I was out there saying, yeah, he's great. He's such a great husband. So yeah. And then, you back yourself into a corner. And these covert narcissists, they are, like you say, they are tricky. Because then I've basically painted myself into a corner saying, singing his praises out in public. And then to have to turn that around and say, well, really, he was abusive, and then you really worry, well, who's going to believe me? So it is, it's a very sticky spot to be in.
It is, especially when they begin their smear campaign against you.
Oh, yes.
And a lot of times they'll do that before you even get out of the relationship, before they're laying the groundwork already to make you look like the crazy one, so that by the time you're ready to start telling people the truth of what's going on, you've already been discredited amongst a lot of people.
Definitely. I would say in my case, I did not give my ex-husband very much lead time when I left. He did not believe for a second that I would ever leave him. He was just very confident that he had me stuck and there was no getting out. So I don't think he was necessarily launching a smear campaign before I left, but I do believe now that the minute I left, that's when the smear campaign started, and it's still ongoing. 2 years post divorce, he is still out there running this smear campaign, and it's interesting. It's something that I never thought he would do. I guess I was just living in some fantasy world. I don't know. But the smear campaign was the one thing that caught me off guard. I really didn't expect that. And I think I thought at the end of the day, people would believe me, and they didn't. So that has been probably to date one of my biggest struggles, dealing with the loss of friendships. I've had to just basically turn people away. I've had to walk away from these friendships because I just, it's not healthy anymore. So that has been, knowing that this smear campaign is ongoing, it has been really difficult for me, I have to admit.
Yeah, it's, obviously being in the abusive relationship is awful, and you're just in pure confusion and survival mode. But it's difficult once you get out of the relationship too, especially if there's anything that ties you to that person. If you're married and you have to get divorced, and there's perhaps you own things together that needs to get split, or you have children together, then they can still hold things over you and start the post-separation abuse portion of everything.
Yeah, and it's interesting. My kids were both grown when I left, so we did not have to deal with custody and family court. But it's interesting. I have no contact with my ex. I haven't seen him since the divorce and have not spoken to him. But he still finds ways to get at me, and even if they don't have access to you, it's amazing how they will never let that anger go. I mean, the idea that you left them, that they were discarded, that goes against every rule in their playbook. And I think they just, they don't ever quite let that go.
They don't, because you're property to them. You belong to them. And how dare you leave them?
Right. Property. That's a great analogy. That's all that the victim is to the narcissist, is a piece of property. It's an ownership situation. It's not a two-way, loving relationship. It is, I own you, and that's it. You're my property. So very, very flawed thinking, and it's extremely toxic.
Horribly toxic. One thing that I've learned with talking to individuals, and even some very close friends of mine who are post abusive relationships, and even some who are currently in relationships that I identify as a narcissistic relationship, one question they always have is, what did I do wrong? And where is that? Why did he change? In these cases, it's all my friends have been female, and these individuals have been female, and their abusers are all male. but why did he change, or what did I do to make him change? And I think it's difficult to finally get to that realization of that person you fell in love with actually never existed.
Correct. I mean, it's all a mask. It's that cycle of love bombing. My ex-husband looked like the greatest catch in the world. He was smart. He was so interested in me. He was over the top gifts and attention. And I mean, everybody around me is like, wow, he is a great guy. That person never existed. That was only he was only showing that side of him to kind of get me hooked. And then all of that changes. Once you get married and once that they kind of feel that ownership over you, it slowly that mask starts to slip. And it's kind of it's not an overnight thing. I think it's more of a gradual, it evolves. Narcissism, that abuse, it just evolves. And yeah, it's it's not always overnight.
Right. And it's very personalized because they react with however you react. So if they're verbally abusive or degrading and you stand your ground and you say, that's not okay and I'm not going to tolerate that, then they might be apologetic for a while and then
They
not.
can be, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, they can. I honestly don't think my ex husband ever apologized once in 29 years of marriage. I mean, if he did, I certainly can't remember it. But yeah, if they apologize, it's not most of the time. It's not genuine, And
No.
those types of conversations that you were talking about, in my situation, if I brought up anything that he had done wrong, he would find a way to turn it around to where I had done something wrong. And, if you try to bring up a simple point, hey, can we talk about this? Because I didn't like the way, you said this to me or did this. That might escalate into a 2-hour discussion. And at the end of that discussion, it's just circular talking, and at the end of that discussion, it will all somehow come back to me that I was the one that did something wrong. And really, it's exhausting. And after a time, I just stopped bringing things up in my marriage. It was like, I don't have the energy to deal with the lecture that's going to ensue. And then it's all going to be my fault anyway. So I think as victims, we learn to just keep things to ourselves.
Absolutely. And then when you get into that circular conversation, I forgot, oh my gosh, I don't know how I forgot the circular conversation, but it's almost like you want it to get over with. So eventually you end up apologizing. I think
Yes.
initially you apologize because you are fooled that somehow this was all of your own doing and your own fault. But as time goes on and you start to realize what's happening, you'll just apologize just to get it over with.
Oh, I did it all the time. And then you're angry with yourself for caving. I caved every single time. But honestly, I mean, it's like being interrogated. And these lectures could be, I mean, I think the longest one that I ever sat through was over 4 hours long. It's exhausting, and his aim is just to wear me down so that I will then just give in and say, yes, you're right. I'm wrong. I'm sorry. And yeah, every single time that's how it ended because I was just exhausted and I wanted to leave the room. Um, so yeah, it was that really can do a number on you psychologically when you basically are just to escape the room and to escape the situation, you take on blame that's not yours and you apologize for something you didn't even do.
And then that screws with you even after you get out.
Yes.
And you look back and, oh my gosh, I've done this so many times. I've looked back and I've thought, did that really happen? Or did I exaggerate what happened?
You gaslight yourself. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, you really do. And if I were to then bring that up to my husband, it would be, well, there's something wrong with you because you are too sensitive. That shouldn't have bothered you. And therefore, either you're too sensitive or you're remembering it wrong or you misinterpreted it. And then you start to think, well, I don't know, maybe I did. And then this whole gaslighting yourself thing starts. So it's a lot to untangle when you finally get out.
Oh, it definitely is. And mine would always say, I was just joking.
Oh,
And
yes.
I mean, some things you're like, how is this a joke? How was that even a joke? I don't understand how you can say that was a joke. But yeah, your whole reality is so turned upside down. Did you have a final moment that was your last straw, or could you sense that there was going to be an end to this?
Yeah, my physical health was really deteriorating in this marriage. Those last year or two, I was having chronic pain, stomach aches, headaches, anxiety attacks all the time. And I kind of realized I wasn't going to survive. It just was not sustainable. Our bodies are not meant to live in this constant state of fight or flight. And that stress will really wreak havoc on your physical health. So that was going on, and just the abuse was escalating to a point that I was really feeling like I was in danger. And I remember I was doing a lot of research late at night and reading, and I came across a post on Instagram late one night, and it was talking about true intimacy, and it was saying that true intimacy is not necessarily physical. It's more about being able to look at your partner and say, I feel safe with you. And I read that and I thought, I don't feel safe, and I asked myself, have I ever felt safe in this marriage? And really my answer was no. So it was sort of the catalyst to kind of get me thinking, with my health and everything, and I think I need to get out of here. So it was a quick turnaround. Once I realized I needed to get out, I mean, in a matter of a few months I was gone.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common, across there are some stories that are a little bit different, but I think there's usually a catalyst that gets your mind in motion of this is not sustainable. And for some, there's an ultimate last straw of, I've been thinking I was going to get out and now I'm definitely done.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that I had a real last straw, but the last few months, like I say, I was really living in fear. I really feared that things were going to turn physical. And he was just getting more and more volatile. And it just, it's kind of all the stars kind of aligned for me. And I just knew when it was time to go, I had to go. And so I'm glad that things kind of fell into place like they did. I think for a lot of women, that's not necessarily the case. And so I feel very lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those of us who are able to get out, and I can't say unscathed because all of us have some sort of scars from these relationships. But okay, so I'm going to ask you the question it's one of my most annoying questions that I hear people ask. But, you were in this marriage for a long time. When did you realize that it was an abusive relationship, and why did you stay? I hate that question, but
That's the $1 million question,
hmm.
right? When did I realize it was abusive? I don't think I realized until 20 plus years in that it was abusive. And I think that maybe somewhere deep inside I knew it was abusive, but I told myself it wasn't. It was a coping mechanism to normalize it, just to say this is how everybody lives, this is normal, and really just kind of look past it. Why did I stay? I think, it's a complicated answer to a seemingly easy question. Um, I think that like I say, I normalized the abuse. I told myself this is okay. I had kids, and that really played into my decision making. In retrospect, I did not make the right decision. For a good part of the reason that I stayed was for my kids, and I think society tells us you keep your family together. You don't break up the family. You don't want your children to be children of divorce. And so I was listening to those societal norms, stay for the kids. Now I know, being on the other side, that staying for the kids is sometimes the worst thing you can do for the kids. Hindsight is 2020. But yeah, that, and then I think there's just this embarrassment factor too. I mean, it's a lot to have to basically confess and say, this has been a horrible marriage and it's been abusive and I never told anybody. And, then people are going to say, well, why didn't you tell somebody? Well, I don't know, I mean, and so to have to flip the script and say, yeah, I've really kind of been living this lie with him. It seems like a lot to take on. It's a daunting idea of leaving a narcissist. And then, of course, another thing that played into that was just fear. I really was fearful of what he might do if I left. So it's there's a lot of reasons why people stay.
Yeah. And, especially when he's covert, it's difficult to really pinpoint that as abuse because
Yes.
you can explain some of the behavior away, or you can think of, well, maybe it's just anger management, it's stress, it's, all these different things that it's not this blatant abuse. And even for those who have blatant abuse, even for those individuals who are going to the ER with bruises and broken bones, they still have a difficult time leaving. And you pointed out a really good reason: legitimate fear.
Yeah.
Because, that time you leave, that's the most dangerous point of anybody's life.
It really is. I mean, that's the scariest point, is when you are leaving. You mentioned about anger management, and that's interesting because at one point in my marriage, I decided that was the problem, that he had anger management issues. And I told him that, I guess this was, I didn't really threaten to leave, but he might have been a little bit concerned that maybe the idea was spinning around in my head. And so he said that he would go to therapy for anger management. And I thought, wow, I can't believe he's actually going to do something, like admit that he might have a problem. And so he found a therapist, and he went several sessions. And then the therapist wanted to see us both. Or I guess he wanted me to go with him. I don't know. But anyway, I remember going to therapy, and I thought I was going to hear how, yeah, he has anger management problems and here's how we're going to deal with them. Instead, the therapist tells me straight up in his office, he said, I don't think your husband has anger management problems. And that was a huge blow. I mean, and what had happened was narcissists love to go to therapy. And I didn't know this at the time, but he just went in there and charmed his way through all these sessions and acted like the most humble, gracious, considerate man that ever lived. And the therapist was totally bought it. And so I leave there thinking this whole thing has now backfired on me, because now he's saying, I can't believe you made me go to therapy and I don't even have a problem. See, you're the one with the problem. So that set me back a few steps. Then you're thinking, well, maybe it's me. So yeah, that whole anger management thing, that was, I thought I had, I thought I had diagnosed him. And yeah, anyway, it was
Yeah.
narcissism actually,
Well,
but I wouldn't
yeah.
find that out for several more years.
Well, and therapy that's it frustrates me too. Therapy is great. I love therapy. I go to
It can
therapy.
be great. Yeah, it can be
Yes,
great if
it's
you have the right therapist.
right. You have to have the right therapist. And honestly, I don't know if there's any situation in an abusive relationship that I would ever recommend couples therapy, because
Yes.
when you go to couples therapy, you're already admitting or taking on part ownership of the relationship not working. You're going in to work on the relationship together. And it's almost this admittance of, okay, there's something that I'm going to have to work on too. And I feel like what it does, especially when you get these really talented narcissists or others with personality disorders that are able to manipulate, they're able to take that situation and validate everything that they are doing to you.
That's exactly what happened in my situation. So the last year or so, maybe the last 6 months, my husband actually wanted to go to marriage counseling, and I agreed, not knowing that that is not advisable when you're with a narcissist. Like you said, the whole thing. We probably did 10 sessions with this therapist. Fortunately, this lady was really good. And that's not always the case. But we did about 10 sessions, and basically these sessions were him sitting on the couch telling her everything I was doing wrong. And I really didn't talk for much of the sessions. Um, it all worked out in my favor in the end, because after about the 10th session, In the middle of the session, the therapist stopped us. She looked at him and she said, "I'm sorry, but I cannot continue to see you." And my mouth was just, I couldn't believe it. And she said, "You come in here week after week and you tell me everything that is wrong with your wife." And she said, "You are not able to see things from other people's perspectives, and you cannot put yourself in someone else's shoes." So she said, "As much as I would like to continue to take your money, I can't do it." And she told us, she said, basically she told him, "Don't come back." And that was a shock. I was like, she just kicked him out of therapy. Like, I've never heard of a therapist kicking a client out of therapy. But yeah, it happened. And that was some major validation for me.
For sure. That does not happen very often, and that's thank God you had a good therapist there.
Yeah, yeah. I think the one of the last kind of exercises that she had us do in her office was very interesting. She asked us both, she said, "Tell me what's on your bucket list." And I thought, what a strange question for her to ask. Like, why is she asking that? But she had motive. Um, so she asked him first, and he started, he went on for 10 minutes. "I want to travel here and I want to do this and this and that." And he went on and on and on. And finally, it was my turn. And she looked at me and she said, "Tell me what's on your bucket list." And I could not think of one single thing, not one single thing. And she started coaching me and she says, "Well, is there somewhere you want to travel?" Like, and I said, I don't know. I don't think so. And she said, "Well, do you have any goals? Like, what are your goals?" And I said, I don't know. And I think the reason that she did that exercise was to illustrate that he had basically stolen my entire identity. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. I was just, I had just given my whole self to him. And I think it was the next session that she actually kicked him out of therapy. So, yeah, I guess it was pretty telling. At the time, it seemed like a strange question, but yeah.
Wow, that's because they're parasites. They suck
Yes.
everything out of you until you're just a shell of what you used to be.
Yes, definitely they do.
Oh,
You don't know yourself coming out of that type of marriage. You really have to say, I don't know who I am. What do I want? What are my goals? What do I want to do with my life? Because I really didn't know.
yeah, and you can't even say that you have to re-identify or, create a new personality because you don't even know who you are anymore. It's like you actually have to identify, not re-identify. You have to recall who you are. And you come out a different person, a different version of yourself, eventually after you put the work in. But it's hard to remember who you were going into it, even if it's a short relationship. I
Yeah.
think they're just so skillful at destroying who you are that it's hard to even remember who you're supposed to be.
Yeah, definitely it is. And like I say, I got into this relationship at age 19. So it was, yeah, I had to really stop and think, like, what do I want to be when I grow up? I
Yeah.
don't know. I just, you come out with so many questions. You really have to find yourself again.
Yeah, especially at 19. At 19, you don't know who you are. So you haven't
No,
even fully figured that out before he just wiped everything else out.
yes, completely.
I wanted to bring up, you mentioned, what society says as far as norms and marriages. I feel like when you are a victim of an abusive relationship, society, everything you do is wrong, according to society, no matter
Yes,
what you do. Because if you're a parent, you're wrong for staying in that relationship and exposing your children to an abusive relationship. But if you leave with your children, then you're wrong because you're splitting up the
yes.
family.
Yeah,
And
you can't win,
no,
and yeah, you split up the family, you break up the family, and that was one thing that my ex-husband used to guilt me after I left. "I can't believe you're breaking up the family." And I did. I felt bad, not bad enough to go back, fortunately. But yeah, it is really, you can't win. You're wrong for staying and you're wrong for leaving.
yeah, you tried too hard, you didn't try hard enough. and it's hard, and especially if you've been gaslit those many years, and you, like you mentioned earlier, you gaslight yourself. So then you're questioning if you're doing the right thing, even
Yeah.
years later.
Yeah, you really do. And because it is a big decision, and there are a lot of things too. I mean, I was concerned about how it would affect my kids, obviously. And it's, so there's a lot to unpack there. You've got to think about just where do I start? What do I do? Because I really didn't know. I had never really worked, and it was a bit overwhelming. But in the end, like I say, it all kind of came together for me, and I feel very fortunate.
Speaking of your kids, did they ever talk to you about any of this since they're older?
Yeah, yeah. So that's the nice thing, because they are older. They were over 18 when I divorced, so we didn't have family court and all of that. And I felt like, because they're both adults, I felt like I could talk to them about why I left. And that we had nice adult conversations about it, and we've talked extensively. Both of them were very much in support of me leaving, so I was lucky that I had their support behind me. They both think that I should have left years ago, but again, hindsight is 2020. So we have had good discussions around it, and they both still have a relationship with their father. He is their father after all. And sometimes I have to remind myself that can be hard. But they do. They do have a relationship with him, and as they should. But they also realize that he is, not neurotypical. And so I think that's important.
So, what steps did you, first of all, when you left, how did you leave?
So I left slowly. I didn't want him to know what I was doing. So what I did was I started staying at my parents' house and making excuses for why I needed to stay over there. And after about 2 weeks, he started saying, "What are you doing? Like, are you coming back? What are you doing?" And finally, I said to him, I just need to take some time for myself. I'm not doing well, and I just need a break. And that was kind of how I got away. Um, and then, because I didn't have the courage to just say to him, "I'm leaving." So I kept up this for almost a year. And, we were separated for a year before I could file for divorce. I just didn't have the courage to do it. But yeah, it was a gradual leaving process. I knew I wasn't coming back. He didn't know that. I was petrified to tell him that, I wasn't coming back and that I wanted a divorce. So I felt like leaving slowly kind of softened the blow and made the environment a little bit safer for me, and that's why I did it that way. I didn't go no contact like, you know, they will tell you to do when you're dealing with a narcissist. To me, that felt dangerous. So I sort of went low contact and just sort of faded out, faded out the conversation, because for me, that felt like what I needed to do to be safe.
That is such a key thing for, anybody listening, is that you can have all these professionals telling you the way to do it. You can have other survivors telling you the way they did it or what their recommendations are. But it's each victim, each survivor, they know their abuser like nobody else. And
Right.
you know what is the safe thing to do. You know what is a dangerous thing to do. And for all the people who say, "Why did you say that?" Like we were talking about before, legitimate fear is one of the reasons. And people, you know your abuser. You know if you just abruptly leave, he's going to come for you and he's going to harm you, if not
Yeah.
kill you.
Yeah.
And if you know that, then don't do it that way. Or, or you escape in the middle of the night, never to be heard or seen from again. Whatever your safe exit plan is that feels most comfortable, because I don't think any of it's going to feel 100% comfortable.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah, well, and I think another real key point there with the exit plan is um, you can't let your abuser know that you have an exit plan. because that will really, I mean, that won't end well. And the other thing is, like you say, you know your abuser better than people on the outside do. And so it's easy for people on the outside to say, oh, he would never hurt you. You don't have to worry about that. Well, okay, maybe he probably wouldn't hurt me, but I can't say definitively that he wouldn't. So why take the chance? You know, I mean,
Right.
maybe I'm being overly cautious here, but if there's the tiniest chance of being hurt in this, I mean, if there's the tiniest chance of losing your life, why would you take that chance? So you really do have to listen to your own intuition.
Yeah. And overly cautious is way better than the alternative of, being too brazen and losing your life because you didn't want to be overly cautious.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Only you know how that person is apt to react. And, like I say, if there's this tiniest chance that it could end with violence, then, you need to factor that in.
Right. And for those people who say he would never do that or he's never displayed any signs of aggression or violence, well, he also has never been faced with his property leaving him.
Yes. Right. And narcissists can have, I mean, if things when they start to spiral out of control, that's when they get dangerous. When they start to lose control and start into this downward spiral, they can have something called a psychic break. And, it happens. And that's what you don't know about. Like, could this escalate into a psychic break? If so, it could get dangerous. And that is something to keep in mind. I mean, narcissists don't accept the word no. So when you leave, even though they've never been physical in the past, that does not mean that they won't start.
Right. And much like how we each have our, last straw or our gut feelings, they also have in their mind what is, I've lost everything.
Yes.
And if they get to that point where they feel like they truly have lost everything, then it's, no holds barred. Like full systems go, I need to go in massive control, regaining control mode. And who knows what
Who
that's going to be.
knows?
You can have somebody who never laid a hand on somebody go all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, that's something to think about when you are formulating an exit plan.
Yeah. And then, so what happens after you leave? Because especially you were married for over 20 years. You were 19 when you got married and, didn't have a career. So what
Right.
do you do? How do you rebuild your life?
Slowly. It has taken time to just kind of figure out what I want to do. And for me, I mean, it's a lot of it is just about healing and really taking things one day at a time. I'm not too far out of this marriage. I've been divorced 2 years now, and it's really been these last 2 years have been it's a lot of growth. It's been really good, but you have to learn how to, in my case, you know, being able to wake up in the morning and say, I can make all my decisions. I can decide how I want to spend my day. It's going from zero freedom to complete freedom. So it's a lot, it's overwhelming and it's scary, but it's also very exciting at the same time. So these last couple of years have just been a lot about me figuring out who I am and what I want to do and where I want to live, and just being able to make like these adult decisions that I've never been able to make before. It's been fun. I say it's a bit overwhelming, but definitely it's been a good 2 years.
It's so liberating, right?
Yeah,
You're just
yeah,
like free. And I think it's important to point out too, with, each victim takes however long to get out of a relationship. If they go back however many times, that's an individual thing. And that's the same thing with post abusive relationship healing. That time, there's no set time. There's not you should feel totally fine in a year, or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years or whatever. That's all very individualized as well.
yeah. And I think, for a lot of victims of narcissistic abuse, I mean, you may never fully heal from it. It changes you. And it has shown, studies have shown that narcissistic abuse can actually change your brain, you know? Um, so you may never fully heal. I mean, these are some permanent scars, but we learn to adapt and move on and find a new life for ourselves. So it's in the end, it's, even though those scars are still there, it's okay. It really is like you will be able to, you can make it, you can do it.
When you wrote your book, did anything come up? Was it difficult? Did you have to take breaks at all?
I did. The way that my book kind of came about was I was in therapy after I left, and I was dealing with a lot of guilt because my ex was saying, I can't believe you broke the family up. I can't believe you've ruined our lives, and I was feeling so guilty and thinking, would it be easier just to go back? I don't want to go back, but would it just make it easy on everybody else? And I was talking to my therapist about this, and she told me, she said, I want you to go home and I want you to take out a pad of paper and a pen, and I want you to write down every traumatic event that you can remember in the last 29 years. And then when you start feeling guilty, I want you to go back, take that sheet of paper out and read it. And so I did. I did that. And ultimately, when I decided to write this book, that's what I did. I took that piece of paper back out and I just started telling the stories of each one of these things. And yeah, so that's kind of how it came about. And it it was really therapeutic. I think writing stuff down, it's sort of a release. You feel like, you can let go of that now. And so I was pleasantly surprised to see how cathartic it would be to write. So yeah, it was ended up being a good thing for me.
Yeah, I think that's. I had a therapist that actually did something very similar. But didn't have me physically write down my story. Had me imagine writing down my story in a scroll because I came in the first session and I was like, I'm leaving. And then the next one, I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to
Yeah.
leave, but I'm not quite, there. And then she had me do that and then imagine myself reading my story. And I kept saying, I feel so sorry. I was completely disassociated.
Yeah.
I feel so sorry for that woman. And I'm so angry for that woman. And then it took a couple times of rereading that in my mind to admit or realize that's me. It's
Yeah.
not the story I just read. So, yeah, I think that writing, some people have written their stuff out and then they burned it.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
never want to tell anyone. But there is
Yeah.
something cathartic, like you said.
Yeah, I understand now why people would do that. It's a release. You feel like once you've documented it, now you can let it go.
Yeah. Um, what was I going to say? Oh, another thing that keeps popping up with victims or survivors who have either chosen to tell their story on a podcast or have written a book is their concern for others. That if they don't know their full story of now my loved ones, my friends, family, they're going to see my story in all of its glory, and the authors or the victim, survivor, whatever you want to choose to be called, is their concern of how other people are going to be able to handle hearing that story. Did that ever cross your mind at all?
It did. In fact, I had trouble writing when I first started because of that. I keep thinking about all of these people that I know that are going to read this book, and I'm thinking I don't think I want to tell that. I don't. That's embarrassing. What I ultimately had to do was I had to just kind of block all those people out and pretend like I'm writing to other victims out there that are stuck in these marriages, that can't find a way out. And I just had to forget that all these other people that I knew would be reading this book, because that is hard. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's there's something a little bit embarrassing about it, but at the same time, it's freeing. It's like, okay, here's my story, and take it or leave it. And so, yeah, but it's hard to put yourself out there.
It is. It's so exposing. It's like you're standing out in the middle of, a busy city, and like completely exposed.
Yes. Yes. It's hard. It is hard. But then when you again turn your thinking over to other victims out there that are, that are suffering, and thinking, well, if this can help them in any way, it's worth it.
What kind of feedback did you get from people?
So a lot of my family doesn't know about my book, honestly. But those that have read it, family and friends that have read it, I've gotten really good feedback. And I feel good about it. I didn't anticipate the feedback being as good as it has been, because, I just didn't feel that confident, honestly. But it's been good. And I know some therapists are using it with some of their clients, and that makes me feel really good. So yeah, the feedback has been very positive.
Do you have any plans for another book?
I don't currently, but I certainly wouldn't be opposed to it. I thought the process was a very positive one, and I would certainly entertain the thought of doing it again. I just don't know what I would write about.
Yeah. You
Gotta have a
definitely do
subject.
want. Yeah, yeah. Maybe the aftermath.
Yeah, I've kind of thought about it. Yeah, I have some ideas swirling around in my head, but
Mhm.
like I say, I'm still kind of on this plan of taking things one day at a time. So I don't really have any definitive plans at all, and so who knows?
Okay. Well, if anyone wants to get your book, or if they want to keep up with any information that you may have, how would they get in touch with you or find the book?
I have a website. It's miajhanks.com. And there's a blog on there. There's links to lots of podcasts, and there's a link to purchase my book on Amazon. It's available in paperback and ebook. So you can get it on Amazon, and I think pretty much online anywhere books are sold. So yeah, and then I'm also active on TikTok. My handle is at NPD and me.
Oh, that's a good handle.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay. And so before we close, do you have any lasting, well, actually, first, before we do that, did we miss anything that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we covered the important stuff.
Okay. And so do you have any lasting words of encouragement or wisdom you would like to leave with listeners?
Yeah, I think I would just say, if you are in a relationship that is toxic, that is abusive, um, don't waste time thinking that it's going to get better, and thinking that if you can better yourself, that the relationship will fix itself. If you're with a narcissist, it's not going to get better. And I hate to sound doom and gloom, but you really need to find your way out of that. And it's never too late to leave, whether you've been married for 5 years or 30 years. There is a path out always. And you can definitely find a better life on the other side of abuse.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mia, for your time and joining
Thank
me
you.
today.
Thank you
And
so
thank you for your
much.
book. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Great.
If I can stay awake. And not that I haven't started it. It's not like it's putting me to sleep. It's just I'm tired all the time.
I understand that completely.
Okay. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Mia, for joining me today, and thank you, warriors, for listening. I've included the links Mia was referring to, as well as her 1 in 3 profile, in the show notes. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong, and wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone. Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1 in 3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1in3podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1 in 3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.